we have this story that we tell ourselves that we have three co-equal branches of government, and none of the founders ever used that kind of language. They were very clear that the first among equals was the House of Representatives, because it was the closest to the people. Every single member of the House of Representatives stands for re-election every 2 years, and the members of the House of Representatives represent the smallest number of people, so they are the closest to the people. And that's why Article 1 deals with Congress. And the first body that it talks about is the House of Representatives. Article 2 is the president. That's pretty self-evident. Article 3, the courts. Article 3 actually instructs Congress to create the courts. The Constitution didn't create the courts. Congress has to pass a law. It was called the Judiciary Act of 1797 that created the Supreme Court and created all the federal court system. And Article 3, Section 2 says that the Supreme Court shall operate, that it's the court of final appeals, and that it shall operate under regulations and with exceptions defined by Congress. So the Supreme Court, according to the Constitution, and the founders, and they were, again, very clear about this. You can read it in the Federalist Papers, for that matter, 71, 72, 73, by Hamilton. We're very clear that the order, that there was a specific hierarchy of power in the United States. Only Congress can declare war. Only Congress can appropriate money. Only Congress can spend money. If Congress decided to cut off the White House, the president would have no say in the matter. Same thing with the court system. If Congress were to say to the Supreme Court, we're not going to pay your salaries and you can't use your building anymore, they'd be SOL. So, that's where the real power lies and was intended to lies in Congress.
I feel like we're not there now. I feel like, and given our current court, I'd say things have gone slightly askew. But the most interesting thing about all of it, which you didn't touch on yet, is the aspect of the Senate. Because, and as somebody who, Peter is sitting in our studio, so he has access to my little Constitution that I keep right next to, I don't have it here. But the Senate is something that is completely misunderstood by people, and also one of the things that is one of the potential ways to help solve our problem. Right. And you get into that in a few different ways, but talk a little bit about that, because, this whole idea of that we vote for two senators, I've known that that's not how it all started, because again, I have my little handy dandy Constitution, but talk a little bit about that, because I think that is a very smart potential road to fixing some of our issues.
Yeah, well, originally the senators were appointed by the states, and that kind of came to a head with Mr. Cooper in Montana, who was a copper baron. And he stood outside the state Senate in Montana with an envelope, with a pocket full of envelopes, and in each envelope was $1,000 bill, and passed them out to everybody who would vote for him to be the senator from Montana. And when word got back to Washington, D.C., the Senate refused to seat him. But then 2 years later, he got put in anyway by the governor, to make a long story short. But the United States was revolted by this. I mean, this was a big story in the papers about how corrupt the Senate had become, and it had become basically insanely corrupt. Every senator was just dancing to the tune of the richest guy in each one of the states. And that led to the constitutional amendment. I forget which one it is. I think it's 19, but whichever one it is, 17 maybe. The constitutional amendment that allows direct election of the Senate. Yeah. So the Senate got a little more democratic, when that happened in the late 1800s, early 1900s. I forget what year that happened. Maybe I think it was the first 2 decades of the 20th century. But beyond that, right now, we've got a Senate that's 50-50. You have 50 Democrats, 50 Republicans. And yet the Democrats represent 41 million more people than the Republicans do, because the Republicans represent so many low population red states, rural states, and the Democrats represent so many high population urban areas and large states, New York and California and whatnot. And so my suggestion was, Washington, D.C., certainly, there's more people living in D.C. than there are in Wyoming or Vermont. It certainly is worthy of statehood. Yeah. So make D.C. a state. That'll probably be 2 Democratic senators. And then Puerto Rico. Everybody in Puerto Rico, citizens of Puerto Rico, have U.S. passports. They are U.S. citizens, and yet they don't have voting rights. So make Puerto Rico a state. This is not rocket science. And Puerto Rico is, again, large enough to be a state. I think it's a population around 4 or 5 million. I'd have to go back and look. And this idea of adding states to get senators from your own party is not a new one, by the way. Abraham Lincoln did this when he knew that he needed at least 2 more Republican senators. And because the Democratic states the South was being allowed, or were going to be allowed back in. And at that time, it took, I think, 39,000, it's in the book, the amount, but it was in that neighborhood, 39,000 people in a territory for that territory to be legitimately considered for statehood. The number of people that was necessary to have a state House of Representatives representative. And, excuse me, and Lincoln wanted two Republican senators. And so the Nevada territory at that time only had 7,000 people in it, but he made it a state anyway. And then, later Benjamin Harrison, the same thing. He needed 4 new Republican senators to maintain Republican control of the Senate. Excuse me. And the Dakota territories the entire Dakota territory barely qualified as one state, but Harrison needed 4 senators. So he split it into North Dakota and South Dakota, neither one of which had the population that would have justified doing this, and made them both states, got 4 Republican senators. So, there is nothing new to this idea of adding senators. It's just that every single time it's been done by Republicans. So it's time for Democrats to do it.
Right. And obviously the other strategies are things that we harp on all the time. I mean, this crazy idea, Tom, you're sounding a little bit socialist, offer free, high quality public education. I don't know. We can't. I don't know. How are you going to pay for that, Tom?
Yeah, I don't know. Why don't you ask the governor of Wisconsin? He's able to do it without a problem. Yeah,
there you go. When I went to college in 1967, 68, briefly, I'll add, I paid my tuition and my rent. I had a little 1-bedroom apartment across the street from MSU that shared a bathroom in the hall with all the little, the rooms. I basically rented a room. And I paid for all of that working as a dishwasher at Bob's Big Boy and a weekend DJ on a local country radio station. It was not, and I occasionally pumped gas at the Esso station across the street from Bob's Big Boy on Trowbridge Road. It was easy. I was not wealthy. My parents had no money. I left home when I was 16 and have been supporting myself ever since, 100%. And you could go to college, but I mean, I didn't know anybody who had college debt, literally nobody. And it was very rare. People who had college debt were people who were like working on their PhDs and MDs and stuff, So what we learned from the era that immediately preceded me, my father, who, signed up for World War II when he was a teenager, on the GI Bill, he went to college for 2 years. Then mom got pregnant with me and he had to drop out. But he went to college on the GI Bill, as did my wife's father, Bob Gussie, who went all the way through law school and became the assistant attorney general for the state of Michigan. And he was from dirt poor. I mean, no running water poor family. And what we know now from the cost of the GI Bill is that for every dollar we spent educating people like my dad and Louise's dad, we got back $7 in taxes in return from both the increased earning power of those people who now have college educations and the increased contribution to the economy that they made. It's the very best investment that any country can make, is to invest in the education of its young people. This is why the only developed country on earth that has significant student debt is the United States.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.